Like once you start spending time with this character who's only walking, it's kind of like, well, why isn't he using his hands? And that, offers like a whole set of like other questions about, about Nate's unwillingness. In this case, it's like Nate is unwilling to ask for help. And that is kind of in a nutshell, like what his problem is, so to speak. He will not ask anyone for help, which is very relatable, but that kind of grew out of the mechanics as opposed to them starting with like, oh, I want to do a game about, this kind of, I don't know, incel-esque fail son kind of character who, if you started with the story, maybe you would have ended up with like a different type of game. But the mechanics really, in this case, like really did drive the narrative components. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I loved how that came up. How there's so many games where the narrative is the sort of like starting point, and then you build mechanics to like achieve that narrative. And I think this working in the opposite direction, like starting with a mechanic and then letting that mechanic then generate this whole world around it that has to make sense of, okay, like these like fundamental like design principles that you covered, where it's like, you like if you fall, like you really fall, like there are no checkpoints. If you see something, you can climb on it. So that you linked up to that Matthew Matosis video on aesthetic deception, which I thought was like a really useful way to think about this as well, where like, that there's nothing aesthetically deceptive about this environment. If you see something, you can try to walk on it. You won't quite know if the angle is just right, and it's going to make your weird body flop over. But I think that there's something really fascinating about starting with the mechanics and the principles of mechanics, and then seeing what kind of world grows around them. And I think you can feel that kind of like organic growth when you're playing Baby Steps.
I mean, the other thing that I like about Baby Steps as well is because so much of the game focuses on really understanding the mechanics of walking. For those who haven't played the game, you basically, the character basically lifts his, basically Nate lifts his left and his right foot, and then you can kind of like use the thumbsticks to sort of like adjust his balance. That's really and that's really about it. And so you're constantly kind of like picking up and replacing the step and trying to sort of assess the grade of a particular stone, or trying to get over a bridge or whatever it might be. And the big thing is like he has like almost no thigh strength. That's like the thing too. He like really does not have a great ability to like, he really does not have the ability to like, so going upstairs, for example, is something that ends up like being like very difficult for a character like Nate. One of the things I liked is the game is really in a rejection of, I think, a maximalist tendency that we see in games, particularly as it relates to complexity. I talked with him a little bit, was reminded of this idea from the philosopher Michael Polanyi. He talks about the difference between like tacit and focal knowledge. And so like when you're learning to play the piano, for example, you just learn to play all of the individual keys, but as you become more of an expert. I'm finding this now, I'm like working on my Spanish, and I have to focus. I'm at the stage now where like I have to focus on actively talking as opposed to trying to translate each individual word. And so we take for granted with certain types of skills that they all start with this kind of like focal knowledge. We focus on each individual keys, and then that becomes Tchaikovsky or whatever it might be. Bennett's approach is really interesting because I think he is demonstrating that there is like near infinite richness in very small micro interactions in a way that I think is really profound, and that you could take any kind of interaction of a digital body and a digital space, and if you work on it, that in and of itself could be compelling. And that is like such a reminder about, for me, such an exciting reminder of how much games still have yet to do, right? It's just walking, right? It is just a walking game, and it creates all this kinds of richness. And so before we take these like big, cognitive and narrative leaps about going to X place or Y place, it's like, it is possible to go very big. It is also very possible, and big systems games that do this, that try to simulate each individual piece, but you can also get incredibly granular. I think that is something really beautiful, and you do see this in other mediums as well, where you have a great story that takes place like in a room, and you have a great story that is a grand epic that goes around the world, or there's lots of ways. Film does the same thing. You can have a great story that's inside of just a particular interaction of two characters like sitting at a table, and something that is Fast and the Furious or whatever. So it's not an indictment that say like one type of game is better than another type of game, but it is this reminder of like games do really have this ability to go very, very small, and that can provide a tremendous amount of like richness in its like interaction systems.